Welcome everybody on this sunny Friday morning here in Cambridge for a panel on the evolving UK mathematical landscape. I think it's a great topic because it's also a great landscape. We'll look at various components of the landscape before we then go into a discussion and survey of how things fit together and what the evolving means in these times where lots of things evolve. I'm Günter Ziegler. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the International Mathematical Union. I guess that's why I'm here mainly now. I'm also the president of Freie Universität in Berlin, sort of in my daytime job. I have 5 panelists here, and the idea is that they will be giving short presentations from their various points of views and mountaintops into the landscape. First, Mion King from the London Mathematical Society, the international secretary. Then Alison Etheridge talking about the Academy for the Mathematical Sciences. Then Chris Breward, who will talk about the Knowledge Exchange Hub for Mathematical Sciences. And then Ian Strawn, on a former head of a department and with a specific perspective. And then Lynn McClure, Royal Society Mathematical Futures Program. Each of them will give a short presentation. I will not read bios or any of that, but I'll just let you get going. And I'll annoy you if the short presentation isn't short enough. Stretches the limits of that, so we have time to discuss them.
Yeah, okay. Indeed, we have a very tight schedule, so I'm going to probably speak rather quickly. So my remit here is to tell you something about how London Mathematical Society fits into this theme of the evolving UK landscape. And it is very appropriate in many ways because the LMS is evolving very quickly, I think. So I've been on the council of the LMS for about 5 years, and even during that period, it's changed a lot. I think for the better, and I like to think of the LMS as being a very progressive institution. So maybe I'll start out, oh, sorry.
There's a clicker.
No, this is fine, I think. I'll just remind you briefly what it is the LMS does. This is just a quick summary of its role. And maybe that first bullet point is the main thing. That's what we think of as our core mission. We promote and extend mathematical knowledge via our various programs, grants, fellowships, prizes, events, meeting, the various LMS meetings, right, and publications. All of these are changing, the demands are changing, what's appropriate is changing, and so forth. That's causing us to evolve, mostly for the better. Of course, in the case of publications, there are many challenges, which it would be too boring to go into over here. But that's not all we do. That's what I refer to as our core mission. On the other hand, we also do the other things. We advise various sectors of society on policies, actions, and any of these things that have substantive connections to mathematics. So, for example, just to give you a flavor of it, we have a committee on education, we have a committee on research policy, we have a committee on women and diversity in mathematics, and I hope that gives you a sense of the kind of things we get involved in this direction. We also collaborate with all kinds of academic institutions, mostly in the country. For example, we have representatives in all the universities, and we collaborate with other institutions like this one here, INI, the KE Hub, ICMS, where I work, the Heilbronn Institute, and various learned societies, and try to maintain vibrant connections that help us all do our work together. Finally, we represent the global membership. It is a member-based society, so we have to represent the viewpoint and priorities of our members. It doesn't mean we are only interested in the interest of the members, but to be a member of the LMS, we view as being in line with all the other great things we try to do for the mathematical community in the country and the world. Maybe I'll give you a very brief summary of the current priorities of the LMS. We have something going on for the last few years, maybe 3 years, I think, called the Campaign for Mathematical Sciences. This is a big national campaign that tries to bring mathematical sciences to the fore of the public consciousness. We try to reach out to government and industry, education, and various sectors of society that are concerned that can benefit from connections with mathematics, and try to emphasize the importance of mathematics in their life. So, for example, this campaign organized a math summit last year, which was very well attended by people, by policymakers, in fact, as well as various stakeholders in mathematics. This was a very successful event and made the headlines to the extent that mathematics does to some extent, was really attended by many important people in government. The campaign for mathematical sciences also has played an important role in having the importance of mathematics discussed in Parliament, things like that. Another very important priority right now is that higher education in the UK is facing enormous pressure, financial pressure, having to do with very complicated collection of factors that I won't go into right now. Nonetheless, you do have restructuring as a result. The mathematics departments are closing sometimes, or face serious challenges, threats to be restructured, and the LMS tries to respond to this and support the departments. Primarily, I think the president Jens Markloff plays a very important role here. He meets with provosts of universities, tries to organize letter writing campaigns to make sure that universities consider their priorities very carefully before making these decisions that impact mathematics negatively. Finally, within this short list of priority, there's the research funding. We try to make sure that mathematics receives appropriate share of the funding that's available publicly to research and education. So, for example, right now there's a comprehensive spending review going on in the government, and the LMS submitted its position on why mathematics should be strongly supported by any changes or any new initiatives that the government might be implementing. Right. I think I'm doing okay on time. So maybe this is the point I want to emphasize the most in this meeting is we do have an international strategy that we formulated 2 years ago at one of our strategic retreats. And the background behind this is at least a little bit interesting because, you know, our name is the London Mathematical Society, and this is sometimes confusing to people from outside the country. It's confusing to me, by the way. I've lived in the UK now for 17 years, but I also worked in the US for a long time, and then I also work in Korea for part of the year every year. So, but this terminology is sometimes confusing to me because on the one hand, it's a London society. It's also a national society. It also has global ambition. I have a feeling that people in Britain somehow enjoy this ambiguity and enjoy confusing people like me from the outside. But anyways, here it is. So we are the London Mathematical Society, which is both local and global. And we've decided that we want to be more global. Part of the reason is because of the National Academy that's been instituted and that's up and running and doing all kinds of important things for the mathematical community. And of course, it is taking on part of the role that the LMS used to play. So the LMS decided, the council decided that well, we should take this opportunity to internationalize more. There is some sense in which a city can be more international than a country. Right? So that's why we thought we would consciously try to implement this philosophy in our operations. So for example, we made a new Global Affairs Committee overseen by a new international secretary, that's me, and we try to connect very actively with our international counterpart and serve the whole community around the world rather than just that in UK. That's our conscious decision at the moment, direction of thought at the moment. So just to give you a few examples of what this might mean, we've instituted the LMS global meetings that's happening this year. So we think of this as just like the LMS regional meetings that happen in the country, but it happens somewhere else. So for example, I'm organizing an LMS meeting in Hanoi. Somebody else is organizing a meeting in India, Jens and somebody else. And there's also a meeting in Southern Africa meeting that will happen in South Africa. So these are things that we are very serious about and that we hope to continue in diverse ways all over the world. So if any of you are interested in organizing a local LMS meeting in your part of the world, we're very interested in collaborating on that. Right. And of course, we are the IMU adhering organization, which means that we sort of represent the UK mathematical community to the IMU. And we hope that our global perspective that we have at the moment will even enhance our collaborative capacity with the IMU. Maybe one last thing, slide I have here that gives you some flavor of the kind of schemes that the LMS is working on right now is this math degrees for the future. This brings together probably a lot of the themes that were mentioned on previous slides. Because of course, when we think about what it is to be future pointing, training of young mathematicians is a critical part of what it means to think about the future. But as I mentioned, there are various threats to education in mathematics at the moment. And the campaign for mathematical sciences is organizing this. It's funded by XTX Markets, and we are administering it at the LMS. We, meaning the LMS, is administering it. And the idea is to encourage people to come up with plans for innovative programs in undergraduate level mathematics. So satisfying those, having the characteristic of those bullet points. It should be really innovative in teaching and curriculum design. Meanwhile, it should also maintain a core focus on foundational mathematics. It can't just be, well, we are going to only teach AI rather than mathematics, something like this, right? And it should reach out to a wide pool of students with non-standard background. I used that phrase rather guardedly. Maybe I should have said something else, but we do want to provide opportunities for studying mathematics to people who aren't exactly the type that you expect from the past, right? So a diverse pool of students in many possible senses. So I guess what we're saying is that we would like to use the threat to mathematics education or to universities or mathematics department as an opportunity to actually try new things and turn the possible threat into positive changes. And of course, via this process, we want to generate good practices that can be shared with the wider mathematical sciences community. So this program is already in progress. The applications have been received. There were 37 applications, meaning 37 institutions put in proposals for an innovative undergraduate program that fits into this scheme. And this is out of, I guess, around 100 institutions in the country that have mathematics programs. So it's actually, we received a lot of submissions for this program. It's being processed right now, and we'll have the outcome announced pretty soon, within a few weeks. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about how the LMS fits into the evolving landscape of UK mathematics. But I hope this also aligns with people who have good intentions for the future of mathematics in the world. And we are very, very interested in collaborating with the IMU, with institutions in other parts of the world, developed parts of the world, developing parts of the world. For example, I forgot to mention one kind of collaboration we have is with AIMS in Africa, for example, right? So those kind of things are things that we are very interested in emphasizing more and expanding more at the moment. Okay, thank you. I'll stop here.
Okay, so I thought I'd give you first a little bit of the context for the development of the Academy for the Mathematical Sciences. It's a new initiative, or relatively new initiative, and it came out of a very complex landscape. So in 2018, this is what the mathematical sciences landscape in the UK looked like. So there are 5 different learned societies, and I think each of those learned societies would say very similar things to the things that we've just heard about the London Mathematical Society. So that's the Institute for Mathematics and its Applications, London Mathematical Society, OR Society, Edinburgh Mathematical Society, and Royal Statistical Society. Those 5 organisations historically represented slightly different parts of the mathematical sciences community, but primarily the academic mathematical sciences community for at least the big IMA, LMS, and RSS. And in, speaking notes don't show up doing it this way, of course, so I'm going to have to try and remember the dates, but I think it's about 2001, the Council for the Mathematical Sciences was set up to try to coordinate some of the activities across these 5 learned societies to stop their voices being so diluted by the fact that they were coming out with separate statements on everything. And it was initially the IMA, the LMS, and the RSS, and then later the Operational Research Society and the Edinburgh Mathematical Society joined in as well. The Council for Mathematical Sciences, of which I was chair, so I can be as rude as I like, was not perhaps as successful as we would have liked, partly because it had a very complex governance structure, partly because it only met twice a year, frankly. On the other hand, so that was on the Learned Society side, heads of departments of mathematical sciences have for a long time had essentially an email list and an annual conference where they get together and exchange ideas. And then on the education side, we have the Joint Mathematical Council of the UK. That's a very old organisation, or rather it grew from a very old organisation dating back to the 1960s. And it was bringing together key players with an interest in education, which included all those learned societies, plus another 16 organisations. So we're talking 21 organisations under the JMC, 5 all brought together by the Council of Mathematical Sciences, HODMs, and then we've got this ACME, originally proposed in 2002, again to try to unify voices, to bring people together. And the idea was to try to get the big hitters, the learned societies and those working with the JMC, to operate together to try to convince the Department for Education, for example, of what would be good practice in mathematics education. Now, ACME, Advisory Committee on Mathematics Education, was reconstituted in 2017 because, like all these other organisations, it wasn't being as successful as people had hoped, and it was actually incorporated into the committee structures of the Royal Society. And the Royal Society has a very great deal of resource and a very great deal of convening power with politicians, and they thought that by bringing everybody together, there would be some hope of having more influence on policy in the UK. Okay, and then beyond that, we've got the INI, where we're sitting now, ICMS, which Min Yong runs, and the Heilbronn Institute, which also got a mention, which is somehow the national infrastructure for mathematical sciences. They're all research centres offering slightly different programmes, slightly different services, working together really rather well these days, I would say, but providing a UK infrastructure in mathematics, mathematical research in particular. And Heilbronn, we should come clean, is actually a joint endeavour with GCHQ, the Government Communications Headquarters, who've provided a very great deal of resource to mathematics in the UK, either openly or less openly, over an extended period. I think they're still the biggest maths employer in the UK, which is quite a striking statistic. Okay, so against that complex and fragmented landscape, to be quite honest, the voice of mathematical sciences wasn't exactly coming through loud and clear. And dating back to 2015, to a meeting in the ICMS in Edinburgh, it was an initiative began, which was supported by the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council from an administrative side, but which was an independent review initially intended to look at knowledge exchange in the UK. So why are mathematical sciences not having as much impact as they could on business, industry and government? We actually, I think, are groundbreaking in that area, but it hasn't been universal. It's not every university in the UK that's been really successful in this, and I know Chris is going to say a lot more about this later. So lots of people have heard of the Oxford Study Groups with Industry, which grew into the European Study Groups with Industry, but the aim was to have much more, to have this rolled out nationally and to have a much broader remit. And a man called Philip Bond chaired a review, and in January 2018 published a report called The Era of Mathematics. And although initially that review was all about knowledge exchange, one of the principal recommendations, perhaps the principal recommendation, was that the UK needed an academy for the mathematical sciences because it needed a single organisation to be speaking on behalf of the whole mathematical sciences community. And that whole community includes educators, it includes academics, and it includes people who are using mathematics in business, industry and government. In response to that report, the Council for Mathematical Sciences commissioned what it called the Big Maths Initiative, which is a rather unfortunate acronym when you think it through. So the BMI was two committees which were looking at a strategy for an academy, what should an academy try to achieve, and also were trying to see whether it was even practical to set up an academy. And they reported, and ICMS actually hosted a large webinar in which community came together and discussed the recommendations of those committees, and it was agreed that things should be moved forward. And David Abrahams, who was then the director of the Isaac Newton Institute, led a process which developed a green paper which had a vision and a roadmap for development of an academy. And actually there were two separate visions set forward, one for an academy and the other for what was called the Connected Centres initiative, and which has become the Knowledge Exchange Hub, which Chris will be telling you about. But it was agreed that since these things were more likely to be funded separately than together, although they want to work together, we would have separate roadmaps for the way those things would develop. And since the green paper, which David and his team produced, by that time I was chair of the Council for Mathematical Sciences, and we led more consultations and feedback, and in October 2022 launched the Academy project, which was basically a proto-academy with Christy Marr, who was at the time Deputy Director of the INI, seconded to be our Executive Director, and a team of 80 or so volunteers working together to develop the Academy vision. And lots of things happened. I don't want to go through them all. A very important one was in November 23, here, when the previous government announced £6 million towards the creation of what they described as a new National Academy. Well, we'd actually done most of the work already, and so we helped them develop. They decided that they needed a consultation and that they needed a competition for the £6 million, so we helped them develop that. And unfortunately, by the time the competition had concluded and results were about to be announced, probably within weeks, Rishi Sunak called a general election, and in this country there is a purdah once a general election has been called, and no decisions can be made by government. And so the whole process was paused, and at the end of September, beginning of October 2024, I by then had been asked if I would act as president of this new academy. I was called into DSIT, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and told actually the £6 million was fictional and the competition was being halted with no money being awarded. But the government really believes in our project, and we are the new academy. We're a community-led initiative, and so they do involve us in a lot of discussions that they have, and they call us in when they want evidence. So on the one hand, very positive. They recognised us as a national academy. They're treating us as a national academy. On the other hand, you can't run on air. And so since October, November, we have been working extremely hard to try to generate some money to support the academy going forward. We always wanted a blended funding model, and I think the National Academy of Science in the US is indicating why that is so important, because of course all their employees are federal employees and not allowed to comment on what is happening in the United States. They're offering tea and biscuits to those marching on Washington today. But nonetheless, we're going forward, we're moving forward, we're playing like an academy, and I'll show you some of the things we're doing. Christy has been made CEO designate, so when we have enough money, she will move over to the academy. Meanwhile, she's still formally employed through the Isaac Newton Institute, and the Isaac Newton Institute has given us an enormous amount of support, both moral and physical, in setting this organisation up, and I do want to record our huge thanks for that. And yesterday we had the first meeting of the Learned Societies Forum, which is what the Council for Mathematical Sciences has become, as it is now folded itself in as a group convened by the Academy, which I think is a strong statement from the Learned Societies in their support of the vision. So here's what the landscape looks like today. The Academy logo is that one in the middle with the three sides to it. That's saying that we represent educators, we represent academics, and we represent people working in business, industry, and government. So really the whole community. The 5 Learned Societies are now convened by us as the Learned Societies Forum. We think this has given much better visibility for them for activities happening across the piece, because we're sitting at the centre and providing a lot of connectivity. We also then have very, very good insight into what they're doing, so we can make sure that efforts aren't duplicated, but that we're working together. And we had a very positive and productive meeting yesterday, and I'm sure that will continue. The Hodhams were actually at that meeting. They're very involved in what we're doing. We keep very close contact with them. The Joint Mathematical Council has a reciprocal arrangement. I'm sure Lynn will say something about this, because Lynn is our education lead in the Academy. There's a reciprocal arrangement whereby we have representation on the JMC, they sit on our education work stream, but there's so much overlap between the different groups that we're working together very smoothly. And certainly my vision, I can't speak for them, but my vision is that when we have a little more resource, there will be an education forum of which they will be the core, in the same way as we have a Learner Societies Forum. So that really the Academy is bringing together this landscape. ACME has given us an ex officio seat. On ACME, they're under a new chair who has already had a long meeting with Lynn, and I'm sure that we will work together closely with them. So you'll see there are no fewer logos on here than there were in 2018, but we think it's much more coordinated and collaborative than it was before. I should mention Knowledge Exchange Hub I've put now as part of this national infrastructure. That's what Chris will talk about. Again, my vision is that when we have more resource, that will be something which is even more integrated into the Academy, but it's already the case that, for example, Chris has a seat ex officio on our executive committee, which is the committee which does the meat, the business of the Academy. And the Campaign for Mathematical Sciences you've already heard about from Min Yong from the LMS perspective, funded by XTX, run really by a combination of the London Mathematical Society with help from Connect PA, which is a lobbying organisation. But the difference between the Academy and the campaign is the Academy is an academy. We want to behave like the Royal Academy of Engineering or the Royal Society. We're behaving as an academy for the mathematical sciences. The campaign's what it says on the box. It's a campaign. They're very good at getting access to media, access to politicians. We meet regularly with the campaign. We have a meeting in the diary every n numbers of Mondays. I think it's once a month. Every fourth Monday we meet. But we obviously also meet with them more often than that to discuss what's going on, make sure everybody's informed. Okay, I'm not going to go through the slide because I'm going to run out of time. We regard the Academy as giving an authoritative and persuasive voice for the whole of the mathematical sciences community. The point being, and this was what government has emphasised to us, you're a community-led initiative, and therefore you have the mandate to speak on behalf of that community. And they really value that. And the fact that, in particular, our education work stream can talk to those in business, industry and government is something they've really valued. And the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology actually said, can we see your responses, what you're thinking about in this space? And can we talk in conjunction with the Department for Education? So there's more collaboration going on both within government and within our community. Objectives of what you think they should be, thriving ecosystem, better maths and so on. But rather than using time on that, I thought I'd just show you a few of the things we've done in between raising money. The summit was mentioned. That was organised by CAMS, the Maths Summit. It was a great opportunity for us because we launched the Maths Manifesto. And the Maths Manifesto was something I could not have dreamed of happening 5 years ago. This was a manifesto for the mathematical sciences to be given to the different political parties ahead of the previous general election, saying these are the things we think that you should be doing should you gain any power in the election. What was extraordinary to me was that the whole community came together behind that. And I couldn't have imagined in 2018, certainly, everybody agreeing on the text for a Maths Manifesto. So I thought that was a fantastic indication of how well the UK mathematical sciences community is working together. One of the things we've been hampered by over the last, I guess, over 10 years, close to 15 years, has been that everybody has been quoting a report that was commissioned by the Engineering, Physical and Sciences Research Council to show the value of mathematical sciences. Often we're the hidden figures. And the Deloitte report, as it was called, came out in 2012. And it was a bit embarrassing that we were still citing the Deloitte report until late last year, when the policy unit of the Academy produced this document on the bottom left, quantifying the UK economic contribution in the mathematical sciences. And as an indication as to how big that contribution is, they estimate, and I think it's a conservative estimate, that in 2023, mathematical sciences contributed £495 billion to the UK economy. 20% of gross value added to the UK economy rested on mathematical sciences research. That's a staggering figure, and it's one we've got to shout about. And interestingly, lots of people are shouting about it, including government ministers. So this is the kind of thing that we can do as an academy that we weren't able to do before. What else have we done? responded to curriculum assessment review, responded HM Treasury's call for evidence for the comprehensive spending review, made sure we were aligned with the academy. So when there were with CAMS, so when there were points that they particularly wanted to emphasise, we emphasised them too. Similarly, the Royal Society. So we got sight of people's submissions ahead of time, reinforced the messages going into government about things maths wanted. How to harness the power of mathematical models for better policy decisions. This was produced out of a workshop that took place at ICMS in collaboration with the UCL policy people. And this was our policy unit again. Very useful document for people who want to use maths in policy. Similarly, how to be an astute user of artificial intelligence, joint with some people at the Royal Academy of Engineering. How does a politician know when I go to them and say, ha, you need some AI to solve that? How do they know I'm not selling them snake oil? Well, there are some key questions, and those key questions are laid out. And then this one I love. Maths can take you anywhere. This fits extremely well with that CAMS Maths Degrees of the Future initiative. This is a campaign that the Academy has launched, which shows all the different things that you can do with mathematical sciences. Shows the reach and the power of mathematical sciences. You've got an astronaut, and you've got an academic, and you've got people working in industry. You've got lots and lots of different figures. They don't all look like your archetypal mathematician. They're all doing different things. And this is, I think, a really good window for schools to propagate, maths isn't something which makes you either a mathematician or an accountant. It's something that underpins everything in society. And this campaign is something we're building on. We're building more resource around it. There'll be interactive stuff on the web when Christy learns a bit more web technology or when we get the money to get someone else to do it. So lots and lots of things going on. We're acting like an academy. Obviously, money is still at the forefront of our minds, but we think it's making a real difference. And I, at least, am very proud of the way that the UK mathematical sciences community now works together and is moving forward. So that's where I'm going to stop, and it's Chris's turn.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Chris Brouard, and I have the pleasure of being the scientific director of the UK's new Knowledge Exchange Hub in mathematical sciences, and that's what I'm doing by day. I guess by night I'm an applied mathematician at the University of Oxford, and I thought it just useful if I tell you what I mean by knowledge exchange, because it means, why is it doing two? I don't know. I'll put that down and use the button. So some people think of knowledge exchange as an overarching phrase that describes a whole raft of things, including outreach activities from universities, engagement with schools, engagement with the local community, as well as engaging with business, industry and government to make the most of our mathematical science arsenal. What I'm going to talk about today, which is the focus of the KE Hub, is knowledge exchange with business, industry and government, the wide range of collaborative activities that we do outside where ideas, evidence and expertise are exchanged. Let me try and use that button and that will work better. So the UK has a very rich and long history in doing impactful research. And our expertise includes, and I've highlighted the word includes because I'm sure there's your favourite bit of mathematical sciences which has impact that I haven't listed on there. So it includes those things. I sit squarely in the building and solving ODE and PDE models box at the top. I thought I might just take a moment to tell you not about that, but about our traditional expertise that's been used to solve problems in business, industry and government coming from operational research, touching on three different areas: transport, manufacturing and health and disaster management. So from the manufacturing side, UK KE research, mathematical research has been involved in KE to do with manufacturing and supply chain processes, building digital twins that combine simulation, optimization and real-time updates in order to support decisions within businesses on how they're operating. On the transport side, we are known for having developed lots of algorithms for the travelling salesman problem, but also we've done work using that and other kinds of programming to do management of vehicle fleets, optimization of routes and organisation of public transport, to name just three things. More recently, people in the transport arena have been thinking about how to do greener transport and how we use OR to enable green transport. In terms of health and disaster management, OR is used to improve patient flow through the health system. It's looking at fair allocation of resources. Where do you put your ambulances so they can respond if there's an emergency? And a lot of the things there have been drawn through into disaster management, in particular optimising the amount of supplies, their stores and locations, and how to get things around if something really horrible happened to the country. That's sort of traditional expertise, but we've got a whole host of non-traditional expertise also involved in knowledge exchange. And so, I'll come back to that in a minute. So, we organised a day last year on knowledge exchange for pure mathematicians. That's for people who associate themselves with being a pure mathematician rather than K for pure mathematics, which might be a slightly different thing. It was an online event, 3/4 of a day. I've put the titles up there, but lots of areas that traditionally wouldn't be associated with engaging externally from academia into business, industry and government were touched on that day. If you're interested, all the talks are online. The QR code is there. You can just take a photo of it and get the insights from a group of pure mathematicians who are externally engaging. The next talk in that series, we're going to have today's applied maths is tomorrow's pure maths. Often we hear that the other way around. Today's pure is tomorrow applied. We've got a day event talking about the other way around. The reason I skipped over that, Alison's already mentioned that we launched study groups with industry, which is now a worldwide activity. But during the pandemic, we also learned something called virtual study groups by the Virtual Forum for Knowledge Exchange in the Mathematical Sciences, which is an award-winning format that was really helping out during the pandemic initially, and now looking at problems for social good. One of the things that was realised in the Bond review, which Alison's mentioned, is the increasing realisation of the need to harness whatever mathematical sciences that we have at our disposal to address challenges from business, industry and government. And that led to the Bond review, which led to the Connected Centres Network document. And out of the back of that, the INI decided to set up the sister project to the Academy, which was the UK's knowledge exchange hub for mathematical sciences. And we were launched in, well, the end of 2022 or the start of 2023, depending how you do the definition, funded using the INI's resources from EPSLC, and we continue to benefit from both direct financial support from the INI and also, crucially, their back-end activity, personnel, IT, and finance infrastructure. So thank you, Ulrika. Let me just say that out loud. So that original tranche of money runs through to September 25. I'm delighted that we've managed to secure 4 years' worth of funding, £2 million from EPSRC, which will start on the 1st of April this year and take us through to 2029. So it's quite an exciting time for us. There's our vision. We're going to do things to help people engage with business, industry and government for everybody's benefit. Here are our 5 high-level things. The top one I've sort of mentioned, but we want to make collaboration easier. We want to democratise the use of mathematical sciences in knowledge exchange, making it easier for people maybe who haven't done it before to get involved, and also taking the expertise in local hotspots that we have around the country of traditional expertise and make that available to everybody. We're doing a lot of collaboration with other parts of the infrastructure. Isaac Newton Institute, in particular the Newton Gateway to Mathematics, the ICMS, Innovate UK Business Connect and the Academy. Alison mentioned that I sit on the Academy exec, but we have representatives from all of those organisations and in fact the Heilbronn on our various parts of our management structure too. So let me turn attention to sort of what we've achieved over the last couple of years, which we call phase one, this first bit. So we've drawn together 62 different primarily mathematical science departments across the UK into our orbit. They all have what we call a KE champion, somebody who is passionate about getting involved with knowledge exchange at their university, who engages directly with us. Alongside that, we have 54 knowledge exchange professionals. These are people primarily in the academic sector whose job it is to help facilitate the interface between academia, business, industry and government. We've got a reasonable number of those involved, not quite one for every university that's involved with at a champion level. And then we've currently got 72 business, industries and government partners. The distribution of those is not equal between business, industry and government, so we've only got 2 bits of government and 2 charities, a sort of silent C in there somewhere. But we do have a large proportion of small and medium enterprises. Quite a lot of those 25 are under 10 employees who simply don't have the internal bandwidth to employ mathematical scientists themselves and need to get stuff through the academic community. Let me ignore the governance part there. What do we do? Well, a whole range of activities. Don't bother reading them all. I'll just pick a couple out. We work with companies to figure out what their challenges are and how mathematical sciences might help. We do some information sharing. That can be peer-to-peer. We have regular meetings of all bits of our community, so it might be an academic at one institution is saying what they found works really well to academics from across the community. And we also do a load of training. We've done 10 training courses in the last 2 years. Some of those have been for PhD students. Some of them have been for established academics who want to get into the KE sphere. Some have been generic. What is knowledge exchange? How can you best start with it? Others have been very specific, like how to IP for beginners is the title of that course. So how to deal with IP when you're a mathematical scientist. I'm just going to focus finally on the second one down, which are our triage workshops. I call them our flagship event simply because they're the thing we launched first and they're the thing that's been most successful. So these run fortnightly on Friday mornings, 10 till 11:30. We've done 19 in the year, so we're just coming up to our anniversary next week. And 244 unique academic mathematical scientists have come along to those at those events from 43 different universities. The companies, what happens in that hour and a half, a company comes along and tells us about something where maths might or might not help. And we're trying to do multiple things. Can maths help with this challenge? If the answer to that is yes, who in the community is best placed to take it forward? And those challenges have spanned what I would consider pure maths, applied maths, stats and OR. And so I'm delighted that we've had the response from the community. You know, when we launched this, we weren't sure whether it would work at a national scale. It's online and it really does. Those have led to some follow-on projects and investment by companies at those partner universities. So what are we doing for the next 4 years? We're really keen to stress we're maths area agnostic. And just to demonstrate that, this is the core team, and we have a person who associates as applied, a person as pure, a person as stats, and a person from the OR community. So we really are trying to make sure that we are delivering value to all parts of the mathematical sciences. Here's what we're going to be doing. It's a big, long list. I'll just pull out a couple of things again. So on the upskilling strand, let me pick the top one, sharing good practice and information. We have been writing briefing notes which we send round to the community on grant opportunities in the KE space, written by mathematicians for mathematicians, distilling the information from the more generic versions that go onto the web, for example, with Innovate UK Business Connect. That's the top one. The bottom one there, we're planning on having a scheme where we embed people from business, industry and government for 50-day secondments into mathematical science departments across the country. That's to launch later this year. In the second stream, I'm just going to pick one, that's working groups. We've just launched that scheme last week. The idea here is not to replicate what other people are doing. The IMA has very similar things, as do other learning societies, but to draw together people from business, industry and government and academia into a leadership consortium to lead a theme based around a specific mathematical area. The initial one that was put up was scientific computing and optimization. And the idea there is to get business, industry and government directly engaging with the people that are actually doing the research. I won't bother talking about those things other than just to say we've got a load of money for actually funding projects. We've done a few of those in the first phase. We'll have much more money for that in the second phase. But the other thing we're involved in is something called Mathematical Innovators in the Digital Space, MINDS. And the idea here is to support the establishment of a new career path within universities that is analogous to postdoc, research fellow, lecturer up to professor, but for people who are doing impactful mathematical science and not focused on research and papers. So that's another £2 million over and above the £2 million that we've got through the other route. This is a collaboration between the universities of Warwick and Bath, Queen's University Belfast and the KE Hub. And there is more than half of that money is available to give out to mathematical science departments across the UK to help them launch this kind of career path within their department. So it's great that various different bits of infrastructure money is coming together all at the same time. Here's my final slide. I don't expect anyone to read it. This is some testimonials. People seem to be liking what we're doing. Let me pick the one I like the best, which is from Kraken down at the bottom. So we had our launch meeting at the end of 2023. Somebody from Kraken, Leo Whitaker, came along and he met a load of people. And our convening power of bringing together people from business, industry and government and people from academia really works, because he met a load of people there, like some people at Edinburgh. They seem to have complementary interests, and he's given them £180,000 to do a PhD on the fact that they met for 5 minutes at our meeting. And that simply wouldn't have happened without our convening power. I'll take questions later.
So my name's Ian Strawn, and for 5 years between 2018 and 2023, I was the head of the School of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Glasgow. So my brief today is to talk about funding, UK funding, and how it affects a Department of Maths and Statistics. So this is the landscape of Glasgow. These strange buildings over here is the Scottish Exhibition Centre. That's where the Commonwealth Games were held from, also where the COP26 climate change conference was held. So the University of Glasgow is the fourth oldest university in the English-speaking world. Oxford comes first. Our hosts here, Cambridge coming in second, and then St Andrews. Perhaps differently from the others, the University of Glasgow is very much a civic university. Its success over the centuries has very much been linked and is intertwined with the development and history of the city itself. So this map from the 18th century shows what the city looked like. Like most medieval universities across Europe, it initially developed around the cathedral, which is right up here, and by accidents of geography, the centre of mass of the city moved downhill towards the River Clyde, and this area here, this large area, if you consider it as a fraction of the total area, this area on land donated by Mary Queen of Scots to the university was the home of the university for about 300 years. And this map comes from the 18th century. It was very much an intellectual golden age for the university. Just before Christmas, we celebrated a third of millennia since we founded our chair of mathematics, a post currently held by Michael Weems. And the third holder of the chair was Robert Simpson. He wrote a very influential translation of Euclid's Elements, which Thomas Jefferson owned a copy. The third, and one of his pupils was Colin McLaurin, and very much Glasgow and the Scottish universities were an early adopter of Newtonian principles. And this affected a lot of the people in the Scottish Enlightenment, such as Adam Smith, Joseph Black, who discovered carbon dioxide, and James Watt, the maker of mathematical instruments to the University of Glasgow. So this picture also shows something different, and it's the start of perhaps a bit of a shadow. The city was developing away from its medieval axis, this high street here, into this area here, which is still called Merchant City. And you don't have to go very far in that area of the city to see what the merchants were trading in. There are streets like Jamaica Street. Glasgow's wealth was developed from trade in sugar and trade in tobacco. So in other words, its wealth was developed from the work of enslaved people. And there was also direct involvement in the slave trade. So there was a sort of darker history coming in the university. Also, James Watt may have developed the steam engine. That led to a lot of work in the Industrial Revolution, but it also led to the development of carbon dioxide emissions, global warming. So we have a legacy which we have to face up to. And the university has recently been facing up to this legacy. You might not be able to see this from the back, but it says, near this site stood the house of Robert Bogle, a wealthy West Indian merchant and owner of enslaved people. During the 18th and 19th century, this university benefited from gifts made by individuals who had profited from slavery. This plaque commemorates the lives of those who suffered enslavement. So it's not just a plaque. The university has been launched a £20 million programme of restorative justice with scholarships, ongoing research, links with universities in the West Indies. And we're also an early adopter of programmes to disinvest from fossil fuels, and we declared a climate emergency 6 years ago. We also named a building, it'll be on the next slide, called the James McLoone Smith Building. James McLoone Smith is a very, very interesting character for all sorts of reasons. He was born a slave, but he obtained his freedom and he studied medicine at Glasgow, and in fact, he is the first African-American to obtain a medical degree. But he also studied statistics, and he used statistics to argue for policy change in his home state of New York. So it's a really fine example of evidence-based policy, using statistics to effect policy change. But a very, very quick history of the university. What's that got to do with funding? And this is the James McLoone Smith Building now. It matters because perception matters. And if you split up where the money for our school comes from, about 75% of that money comes from teaching. And of that money, a huge chunk, this chunk here, this comes from overseas students. So those are students, undergraduate students coming and studying at Glasgow, or students coming and doing MScs in Glasgow. And their perception really matters. International student recruitment is very, very much driven by international league tables. If, like Glasgow, you're deemed to be in the top 100, you will get international students. And some of the problems that we faced with UK universities recently, if you fall out of that top 100, you can find your supply of international students, which basically bankrolls not just Glasgow, but many, many of schools of mathematics across the UK. You'll be in a bad way. So perception matters, and the things I've been talking about up to now all contribute to the perception of what the university is. So I'll just briefly explain these other two boxes here. So Scotland isn't England. It's got a different education system, and indeed it had 5 medieval universities, while England only had 2. But to this day, Scottish undergraduates, Scottish home students don't pay for their fees. And this 17% is money we get from the Scottish government via the Scottish Funding Council. to pay for our undergraduate students. As a father, I'm very pleased my children don't have to pay fees as if to the university at the level of £9,000 a year, which they would have to do in England. But of course, as a head of department, I can look enviously south to the English universities who seem to get a lot more fee income by charging £9,000. But of course, we do have English students who come and study within Scotland, and they pay the same rate. So this is perception matters. And perception, the international league tables, really affects your teaching income. You'd like to think that the advanced quality mathematics and statistics research do affects students' choice, but it doesn't really, to be honest. Most students coming to the university will come to the university because of the perceived excellence of the university rather than the actual perceived excellence of the School of Mathematics and Statistics within that university. So while teaching is the major source of income, research, of course, is vital as well. And we split into two here. So this bottom 15 is monies we get for our research from EPSLC. They continue to fund mathematics, they continue to fund pure mathematics, they continue to fund fellowships within mathematics. Thanks very much for Alison for making the case there with the EPSLC Council. But as we're a school of mathematics and statistics, there are other research councils where we get monies from. We have the statisticians get money from for the Natural Environment Research Council and the Social Sciences Research Council from their types of research. And within that, there's also the charity types of funding from Royal Society Fellowships, Leverhulme Trust. There's lots of different bodies contribute to that. So the smallest part of this diagram is to this here. That's our REF income. I was asked to talk a bit about REF. So on the global scale of how a school is funded, REF plays a remarkably small fraction of our total income. However, it really is a positive thing. It really is an agent for renewal. It drives a lot of our reputation. It does feed into the international league tables, as many things do. And universities really care about their REF performance. So you will get support from universities because they want individual departments to do well within REF. And over the years, not just REF, but before it, the RAE, the research assessment exercise, it really has had a huge role, I think, in improving the quality of the mathematical research within the UK. It's led to research-led teaching, and it really is a key factor when you're trying to recruit top staff. And as head, I did a lot of hiring, and I always remembered a line in Halmos's I Want to Be a Mathematician, which says that the most important thing you do as a head of department is hire staff, because that really is the bedrock of everything you do, the teaching and the research. So even though our REF income is the smallest income stream, it probably has a disproportionate influence on what we do and how we operate as a school. So just something about the background picture. This is by 1860, 1870. You can see how much the city has expanded. The railways have come. You can see the black lines coming everywhere. And in what I can only describe as an act of cultural vandalism, the university sold its medieval buildings over here and moved out here. If anybody's visited the University of Glasgow, we are now here. You might, those in the front row might just be able to see here, it says site of new college. So this was the old medieval buildings were demolished, sold to a railway company, and we moved out to this site at the west end of the university, which at the time was very much at the core, at the greenfield sites at the edge of the city, but it is now, of course, the city has grown around it. So perception really matters. and I'll come to that at the end, but what's happening elsewhere within the sector? So these are a picture we've produced internally, so on public available data, and it shows some of the research funding you get, in particular the REF funding. Now, the amount of money you get from REF depends not only on your overall REF score, but of course the number of staff you put in. So there's you have to multiply numbers together. And as you would expect, there's a relation between them. Glasgow came 5th in the REF, in the last REF, but we had a smaller number of staff, so we get less research money that way. But what this graph shows, and we've done similar graphs over the years, is a polarization that is happening within the UK funding maths and stats departments. At the top, we have these massive, from my point of view, universities or math departments of Warwick, Cambridge, and Oxford. Then we see a polarization of sort of metropolitan universities here. Then we have this group here and these smaller ones here. And I said, we've done these types of figures for sort of a decade earlier, and it really is quite noticeable how much the sector has polarized into these particular groupings. Something it does show, and Lynn might say a bit more, the universities which are most under threat, and it's been a lot in the news about universities closing departments and the like, are down here. These are the ones who we have the risk of math departments closing. And there's something which some of the works people in the academy have been doing is studying where do our math teachers come from. We want to have a healthy ecosystem where we get good students coming through the pipeline, and we rely on students being taught in schools. So where do math teachers come from? And the research is that at this end, only about 2% of graduates go into teaching. At this end, about 17% of graduates go into teaching. So the fact that the places who are most likely to be shutting their math departments are the places which generate the teachers for the next generation is a really worrying development in the evolution of the funding landscape. It's one we hope the Academy can take a role in convincing government to do something there. So perceptions matter, so we've just got a final slide. Something we did recently was to cover our building with math symbols. Now, the interesting thing about these symbols is that these are our symbols. These are our mathematics. We asked staff to write down what they were working on, equations, diagrams, and the like, and we've got a graphics design company to put them all together. So Professor Nakajima might notice there's resolution of singularity diagrams here. We've got cluster mutations here. Nalini might notice the extended de Brovin connection up here, and it's linked to his isomorphic deformations. And this is an amazing effect. When it appeared in the university's Twitter feed, it was the most retweeted news article in the history of the university. And people stop, look at the diagrams, they take pictures of it. You see people taking pictures of their children in front of the building. So it's really had an amazing galvanizing effect. And while perceptions matter, there's one perception of a university department which I don't think as a community we do enough to promote, and that's the perception of a department within its own university. And this has had a very strong effect of showing what type of department we are. So my final slide then is just the mirror image of my first slide. It shows the view from the other direction with the Scottish Exhibition Centre in the foreground and the university in the background. And this building over here is called the Armadillo, which I'd like to claim is the first time the word armadillo has been used at the INI.
I feel very privileged to be here today with all you very clever mathematicians
I'm a mere mathematics teacher, but I know that I've got something to contribute to the conversation today. So, incorrectly, in your papers, you'll see that I was the chair of this august group. I wasn't. I was a member of it, but I was a member of the writing group for what became called the Mathematical Futures Project. So Alison talked about the Advisory Committee on Mathematics Education, which is a committee of the Royal Society. And a whole load of factors came together to decide that something needed to be said distinctly by the Royal Society about the state of mathematics education. So in 2020, a 20-year time horizon was established. And you might think, well, 20 years, goodness me, that's far too long. But in fact, to do a wholesale curriculum and assessment change takes that length of time if you're going to do it properly. And one of the reasons that maybe previous curricula have been less successful than others is that they haven't allowed the right sort of period of time to allow things to be really embedded. Actually, although it was originally 20 years, we got slightly overtaken by the fact that the new government decided that there was going to be a curriculum and assessment review. And so actually the two things have tied in quite nicely together. And the board, the Mathematical Futures Board, of which I'm one, comprises FRS colleagues who have significant knowledge in data, statistics, AI, etc., as well as mathematics itself. And then a significant group of people who are knowledgeable about mathematics education. What was arrived at eventually was this term mathematical and data education, and this was a political decision. So it wasn't only about mathematics education, it was felt that we needed to encompass more than just pure mathematics. We needed to look at data, since data is absolutely everywhere. And the questions that we asked were, what are the competencies that will be needed to thrive in the future, not only for academics to thrive in the future, but also for citizens and society? And how should the education system manage this? How should we inculcate this? And what changes do we need to put in place? So we had a wide consultation. It was very important that we felt that we took the community with us. We had lots and lots and lots of responses, and as you may imagine, some of them were polarised this way and some of them were polarised that way, and bringing the whole thing together was quite a piece of work. We also commissioned a lot of research where we felt that we didn't know enough about particular areas. So we wanted to look at, for example, what was happening in other countries where there were successful maths education policies. Final report eventually came out in September 2024, and the link will be on the last slide. So why the case? Well, I chaired the last National Curriculum Review, which was 10 years ago. And at that time, Michael Gove, whom some of you may have heard of, was the Secretary of State. And Liz Truss, whom I'm sure you will have heard of, was our the person who was directly working with us. And I like to say that it was a scarring experience because politicians wanted to interfere a huge amount. But that curriculum is, it's okay. It's now really, really out of date, because if you look at school subjects, nearly all school subjects have some mathematics in them. And if they don't have mathematics itself, then they've got a lot of data in it. We know that higher levels of mathematical and data education are going to be necessary in more areas of work and in higher education and for employment. And we think that's really important fact, that it's not just in one part of the sector, but it's in others. And digital technologies and AI are overtaking lots of things. And now the mathematics education that we're offering our students really is not looking as though it's fit for purpose. There's one really very important reason for looking at the mathematics education system that we have at the moment, and that's because we have a lot of absolute inequity in it. So we should be an education system should be equipping everybody, whether they're going to be mathematicians or not. It should be equipping everybody to be able to make sense of their lives and be confident and competent citizens. And we know that that is not so. And if you look at the bottom bullet point there, 40% of the adult population in England, this is not for the UK, but in England, is functioning at the skills of an 11-year-old or less. 40%. So that's a huge drain on the whole sort of system and the employment system. Lots of people struggle to navigate daily life. So it may be that they have a qualification, a GCSE, which is what they take at 16. They may have passed that, but they can't, for example, plan a journey. They can't interrogate their payslip. So we've got things skewed in the wrong direction in the sense of helping people to become confident and competent citizens. And the second bullet point talks about too many are left behind, and I'll talk a minute about GCSE. So the other thing that we know we need to do is to make connections. So I said that mathematics is in lots and lots of school subjects, but students very often don't recognise the same mathematics being in more than one subject. So the example that's usually produced is the one between physics and mathematics. So not only do students not recognise that these things are based on the same mathematics, but also the way that the curricula are designed means that you actually meet different parts of mathematical knowledge at different times. So quite often you can be expected to use something in physics that you haven't actually really met properly in mathematics. And there's a real disjoint there. Just to talk about the GCSE issue. So in 14 to 18, one of the things that we know is UK is an outlier in mathematics. So in many countries of the world, most countries of the world, students study some sort of mathematics until they're 18. And before we had the general election, Rishi Sunak was talking about the fact that he wanted all students in the UK to study mathematics to 18. At 16, students take GCSE, and GCSE is seen to have big exchange value with employers, for example. So around 600,000 pupils take it at age 16. But it's mostly norm referenced, so it's predicated on how that population did when they were 11, but it is mostly norm referenced, which means that even if everybody became really, really good at mathematics, the lower 35 to 40% of students would not achieve a grade 4, which is what they need to show that they can do mathematics. Grade 4, to get grade 4, you typically have to get 25% of the marks. So we're talking about somebody achieving a pass at GCSE on only being good at 25% of the curriculum. And so what we have then are teachers helping students to spot questions that are going to bring them those few marks to get them over that 25%. So that's why GCSE is not fit for purpose at the moment. But it's even worse than that, because those students who don't pass their GCSE at the moment are committed to have to retake it. And each time they retake that examination, they have less chance of passing than they did the previous time. And that's really important, because money for schools is predicated on making sure that those students follow a course of mathematics and of English. For A-level, which is what students do when they are 18, so that's our final exam, only 15% of our students go on to do A-level maths. Actually, that's grown hugely, and so has the number of students doing further maths, but there's still quite a disparity between the number of girls and the number of boys taking on mathematics A-level. So if the students have passed their GCSE, then they can progress on to either A-level or core maths. So core maths is a relatively new qualification. It's based on, a lot of it is based on data education and trying to make mathematics and the applications of mathematics seem relevant for students. Or they don't do any more maths. So at the moment, the poorest experience that a student would have would be they would do 11 years worth of mathematics education. They would take GCSE and fail it, and then they would fail it again, and they would fail it again. And so they end up with nothing to show for any of their mathematics education. So, Mathematics for Futures was set up to explore all of these issues and to look at the successes, what's already working really well. So one of the things, for example, is the Advanced Math Support Programme, which helps students to prepare for the examinations for Oxford, Cambridge, etc., especially in those areas of the country where there isn't the expertise to support them in that sort of behaviour. So one of the key messages was that we need to think instead of just mathematics, we need to think about mathematical and data education. Key message 2 was that actually we thought that there were 3 different sort of sections, if you like, intersecting sections of mathematics. So foundational and advanced mathematics, meaning the sort of mathematics that actually they see every day at the moment in their mathematics classes. All of those really important conceptual ideas that build up to a map of mathematics. But also there should be some sense of students meeting elements of general quantitative literacy. In other words, being able to apply their mathematics in reasonable contexts. And then we also talked about domain-specific competencies. So that's the sort of competency that you need specifically, for example, if you are studying economics, or if you are studying physics, or if you are studying history. There were 16 recommendations, and I'll give you the link to the actual report and the short version of the report. But the first one, which is the most important really, is that there should be an independent task force. So what happens at the moment is that what happens in the DFE is that DFE identifies 2 or 3 people that it asks to write the curriculum. We used to have something called the Curriculum Qualifications and Curriculum Authority, which actually had experts in designing curricula and designing qualifications, and we think that that needs to be brought back. We think that the curriculum should integrate data statistics and computational tools coherently with mathematics. At the moment, it's very patchy, the amount of, for example, computation digital tools that are used in mathematics. And quite often the digital stuff that is being used allows teachers to do things in a shortcut way. So, for example, getting students to do their homework online where they have the answers there and the teachers don't necessarily need to mark it, for example. One thing that's really important was that we looked at the early years and primary curriculum, and we recognised that one of the things in the early years was missing was the whole idea of shape and space. So if you go into a nursery, you will see students, children, small people, playing with blocks, building things, looking at boxes, taking boxes apart, all of that sort of thing. And that's really important, not only for their understanding of shape and space, geometrical reasoning, but actually students' early experience with geometrical reasoning really affects their later understanding of number as well. So it's really important part. And one of the things that has happened with the government trying to reduce the burden on early years is that they have taken the whole idea of shape and space out of the early learning goals. So it's very patchy now as to whether in early learning situations students actually have a good example of what's going on in shape and space. We think there should be a single mathematical and data education qualifications framework to enable everybody to study up to 18. And one of the ways that we've been looking at that is to thinking about the assessment framework and whether students should be able to have choices about the way in which they navigate both those mathematical concepts and the applications of them and the specific domain competencies. And we think we need a new method of assessment for general quantitative literacy. So one of the things that's being looked at is, should there be some sort of qualification much earlier than 16, so maybe at 14, which actually looks at the principles of deep mathematical understanding that you need to be a confident and a competent citizen. And it won't surprise you to know that the majority of that is to do with proportional reasoning. And where students can't move from additive reasoning to proportional reasoning, actually they get stuck. Computational tools and technologies. I fear that this is going to be one of the things that we really should be doing, and because of the financial situation, we won't be doing. It's very patchy. If you look at education generally, there are some schools that have been able to get sponsorship and they've got really good systems. But even if they've got a really good system, if anything happens, they haven't got anybody who can help them to put the things right. And then there are other places where it's really patchy and you've got maybe one set of iPads between 4 or 5 groups of children. So it's very patchy, and I can't see that really improving in the short term. And the last one, on which everything is predicated, is having a supply of mathematics teachers. And at the moment, we are only meeting about 60% of the need for mathematics teachers in England. I'm not sure what it's like in Scotland, but in England, there are huge areas of the country where there are very few qualified mathematics teachers. And in fact, over 40% of children within 11 to 14 in that bracket, over 40% of them are taught by somebody who has no qualifications in mathematics other than an A level. So if you think about that, there might be a geographer, there might be a physicist, but they don't have anything further than an A level in mathematics. And that's what the children in between 11 and 14 are being taught to. Ian alluded to the fact that we have a real shortage of maths teachers, and the fact that those universities who have lower tariffs, generally speaking, are closing or amalgamating their departments. That's going to really hit the supply of the teacher workforce. And if we don't have good mathematics teaching, we're not going to have people who can go on to do mathematics at A level, and we're not going to have students who are going to want to do mathematics degrees. That is the report. I'm sure you won't want to read the whole thing, but there is a shortened version on the website. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to all 5 of you for fantastic presentations. I would propose we just go on stage here, and I would sort of, to start off things, I would ask one question sort of into the round, but then I would just also ask the audience to, maybe just move the chairs over there. I would just ask, so this is a mathematical task in some sense, yeah. I'll go to the so starting out from the last presentation, I mean, so this was mathematical and data education, and it seemed to me that data seen as really something that belongs to math and that's part of it. And I would sort of ask the whole audience, if we talk about math and the math landscape, what's in there? I mean, there's these days everybody talks about artificial intelligence, what previously was called statistics and data. Are we viewing this as part of the landscape and sort of included in what's done in math, and also talking to business, industry, government? Or is this a separate topic? And I'm asking this question in these awful times where we realize that also on a global scale, we here in Europe have to look at how these topics of artificial intelligence and how we deal with data and all that are important for politics, have to be treated not only by these US tech companies who now sit within the US government and somehow try and shape US politics. So where's the boundaries of mathematics? What subject are we talking about? What are you treating also if you're talking to, I mean, the British government, industry and so on?
Why don't
Yeah.
you?
So I've spent most of my career saying mathematical sciences instead of mathematics, because I think that's a much more inclusive and useful term. And I think those barriers that we set up between ourselves as mathematical scientists have always been unhelpful. I started in what you traditionally call pure, and I have had jobs right across the spectrum. And culturally, we've developed differences which haven't been useful. And as we look at modern mathematical sciences, we see that the really great advances are coming because we are bringing together bits of things that were traditionally pure fundamental mathematics and applying them in data, for example. So that's the first part of your question, is mathematical scientists, please, and that does include operational research, it does include statistics, it does include analysis of data and traditional pure and applied mathematics as well. I even count him as a mathematician. Sorry, we're colleagues, so I can be rude about it. In terms of AI, it is a concern that actually the mathematical sciences community in the UK has to some extent missed a trick there, because it is of fundamental importance that mathematical sciences ideas are embedded in anything we do to do with AI. Without it, we can't possibly understand it. We can't possibly actually exploit it and utilize its full power. But there has been a tendency in some institutions, and I would say including my own, for the very big hitting programs in AI, the mathematicians have a tendency to be very cautious in what they bid for, and they've been somewhat led from either the computer science department or the engineering department. And as an ex-head of department, I'm sure that Ian will share this pain with me. I was head of department during a period during COVID, when we were making things as accessible as possible to everybody, and we saw our own people working in machine learning and AI bringing together lots and lots of things to, generate solutions, and actually it was linear regression and they could do it on an envelope. And we really need people to be looking in a critical way. And so, yes, the old keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Keep mathematical sciences close and AI closer. So we are counting it as part of our remit, not the engineering bit. I'm not going to build an exascale computer or whatever, but the nitty-gritty is ours.
May I go next? So I think my experience of talking to a reasonably large number of companies over the past year is that they don't really know what AI and ML is. In a number of senses. So building on what Alison said, we've had companies that have come and have said, here we've got this very traditional problem from a mathematical sense. Can we use ML to machine learning or artificial intelligence to solve it? And so part of the job of the KE Hub in this space is to triage those kind of conversations with companies and say, actually, you'd be as good talking to a statistician on this as you would somebody who's developing within our community machine learning algorithms or deep learning methodologies. So on the one hand, I see that, and I see that especially with small companies who don't have their own internal mathematics expertise. They've just got a buzzword, really. And then at the other end, we're engaging with people like Unilever. So we have the global head of data at Unilever on our board, and they are very mathematically savvy and they are very data savvy, and they are engaging with members of the mathematical sciences community around the UK to tap into that machine learning and deep learning expertise that we are developing in this country.
Perhaps then from a different perspective, I believe the number of children doing A-levels maths has been going up, but the numbers going to university to maths has very much levelled off. But students are now going to do computing science. The MSCs across the country are driven by international students coming to do AI and computing science. And I suppose we've lost a trick. Some of those should really be coming to maths departments and learning the mathematics.
And
Maybe I'll add two quick comments if it's okay. One is that I do think we need to communicate very well, not just with the general public, but even within the academic sector in some sense. Recently, I was organizing a meeting, a very multidisciplinary meeting involving distinguished scientists from many different areas. And one of the biologists, when we were discussing this question of applications of mathematics to biology, this person had been working on a very data-intensive project having to do with classification of cells in the human body. And when we spoke about the possible uses of mathematics there, this person said, that wasn't mathematics, that was data and information. Mm-hmm. That was the response, very blunt response that was given to me on that occasion. So we need to, it's not just the general public that we need to communicate well with. We need to communicate well with scientists, that's one thing. But the other aspect that I wanted to mention briefly is that to the extent that people do know about the importance of mathematics in AI and machine learning, for example, sometimes mathematics is also viewed as a threat in this regard. So that's something we need to be sensitive about. Of course, mathematics is threatening in many ways, for example, in education. Right? So being somehow sensitive to people's, the nuances of people's perceptions about the role of mathematics is important in all this communication.
I mean, seems very plausible to me, but that means really the picture of what is mathematics and what can mathematics do is important, and basically the picture that you give to politics and the picture that you give to business and the picture that we give to students who want or do not want to study at the university, in the end, of course, have to be also the same pictures. And
I'm not sure it has to be the same picture. I think it has to be somewhat of a nuanced picture depending on the situation. Anyway.
I think we also need to convey what AI cannot do. There is a touching faith in AI at the moment, especially in HM government.
I would say there's the part of what AI cannot do, and that we'll have to get back to that at some point. Also, the threats of what AI can do, or what, and also the question about how solid is what people do with AI. I mean, all these questions will stay around, right? And that's where, in the end, where mathematics is needed.
It's more than that, and it comes back actually a bit to the maths futures. Why do you learn times tables? You learn times tables so that you've got an idea of what an answer might be, and you can interrogate it and say, well, that was nonsense. You know, this guy's cheating me at the market stall. Why do you learn about data and digital skills? Well, if you're going to be a scientist, you want to know that the answer you're getting out is rubbish. And I strongly commend, there is a Schmidt lecture given by Charlotte Dean, who's the executive chair of EPSRC, but is actually a protein informatics person, where she eats humble pie and says we have a fantastic paper in Nature which taught us that machine learning is only as good as the question you ask it. And so what they published was garbage because they hadn't noticed that they were asking it not the question they thought they were asking, but a subtly different one. And I think that it's a salutary tale we should all hang on to. We need to be able to identify when it's telling us something that is wrong.
You were talking about asking the right questions. Is there questions, responses, protests? Yes.
I actually have a question about communication of mathematics, which you just talked about and which came up in loads of your talks. And I loved all of your talks. It was so interesting. But the communication of maths to non-expert audiences, would you like to see that better embedded, for example, in the skills for that communication in mathematics and graduate degrees, or in research funding to make room for education, well, for communication, either by allowing researchers to do it and to train on it, or by money for professional communicators? Is there like a strategy that we should be pursuing?
Could we ask Christy to answer that?
I I'm not quite sure how much I can say on this, is the answer. So the answer is yes, it's really, really important. It's a really big push of the Academy at the moment. We are working on various fronts of mass communications. One of the things that we'd like to do is put together some workshops exploring best practice across universities, universities that currently offer mathematics communications modules, for instance. So that's a very, very big part of what we're doing. And that's just one of a small section. Alison, what else?
So I think the short answer is yes, we are developing a strategy, but unfortunately, because we're discussing it with various philanthropists and sources of funding, we can't tell anyone what it is. But it's absolutely crucial. It's clearly crucial.
And the IMU-INI has been developing programs.
Yes, absolutely.
For training of PhD students and early career researchers. And that's an easy bit to do. In a sense, the hard bit to do is to train undergraduates just because of the volume of students you're teaching.
So, Lynn was talking about that there's so few teachers around there in the country who are sufficiently confident to actually teach. And on the one hand, of course, everything we've heard here is not only British problems and whatever, but on the other hand, I think this confidence to teach and to talk about these things is probably lacking or is not enough in all domains and all levels, right? Do we feel we have enough confidence to be able to represent what's going on, what should be coming, how things can be used, how things are reliable, to talk to the students, to talk to the public, the graduate students, or the teachers, all that. There may be confidence lacking in many things, and of course, confidence should be based on education, should be based on knowledge.
Could I comment briefly on this communication question? First of all, of course, you're doing wonderful work in communication. But I did want to comment because this is a perception I've had for some time. I myself work a lot on public communication, by the way. But my impression is that actually there's a lot of it. There's enormous amount of public communication events, people working on communication, different institutions hosting their own thing all over the country. So I'm not sure increasing the amount of public communication at the moment is as important as having an efficient strategy.
Yeah, we're trying to actually bring together all that
work
to unify.
So I didn't know
that's what
it.
we're going to try to do.
But it does seem like we also need to think about efficient ways of doing this in a way as to reach people.
Exactly, Christy.
Can I challenge back slightly on that, Mimi?
Sure.
Because I think that as a community, we are not always very effective at having the elevator pitch of why the work that we do is important and valuable. And so it's not just getting people who are mass communicators going out and talking to the public. Right. It's actually getting the mathematical scientists themselves being able to tell people what they're doing, why it's exciting, why it's important, and why you should be joining us on this journey.
I completely agree. So you're going to help us do this, I guess, right?
This is great. One of the things that we have in mind.
Could I perhaps ask back this presentation of the Academy, of the knowledge exchange initiative? How broad are these initiatives? How big are they? How many people are in there? Did I get that right? That this is actually rather sort of small things that try and tie things together. This is not like you hired a huge department and now you're doing new and everything.
So great question. May I go first? Yeah. So 60. We've got 62 mathematical science departments and friends. So some business schools and other places where there are clusters of OR. We've got more than 3,000 academic mathematical scientists within the orbit of what the K Hub is doing. Not all of them come. Not all of them are interested, but we have reach into those. And so to have got 62 different departments to nominate a champion that comes and talks to us about stuff, I think is really, from my perspective, that's large, not small.
Yeah, and I mean, the Academy is not a membership organisation. It will have a fellowship, and so how do you measure it? Well, you might measure its convening power, which is ever growing. You might measure the way in which it's interacting with other organisations, number of organisations recognising us and asking us to work with them, including His Majesty's government. Sorry, after a lifetime of Her Majesty. It is growing. It's growing extremely rapidly. It will grow more rapidly as we move to the next stage, which is electing our first cohort of fellows. But it shouldn't be measured in terms of numbers. But of course, we link with Chris. We link with all the people Lynn's with. We're bringing all those people under an umbrella. But
it sounded impressive and successful in really bringing people together in something where this was not previously available, right?
Yeah, that's the overarching vision, is to have a united voice for the mathematical sciences, because together we'll have much more influence.
And this is a process in the moment. What's the time scale where,
if you can find me £6 million that the government seem to have lost, I can do it very quickly. It depends on time. I mean, it's a process where we're growing. I think we've grown remarkably over the last, how many years it's been going, but 1 or 2 years, certainly. I would say that it's exponentiating the rate at which we are growing and the amount of work we're doing, but how much we can do depends on how many copies of Christie we can have. We also have a small policy unit who are sitting at the back. But there are 4 employees of the Academy at the moment, and we're very dependent on volunteer work, and therefore you need a turnover. But it's growing fast, and I think it's with us to stay.
And the convening idea, I think, is really important. So, for example, the curriculum and assessment review, we're asking people to respond to a set of questions. So, from the Academy, that wasn't just the education work stream, because we talked with academic affairs group, and we also talked with the big business, industry and government. So our response was actually a much more mediated response than a sort of a single aspect. And I think that's one of the things that we're increasingly looking forward to. We're looking at working with the academic affairs group to see if we can look at the interface, for example, between school and university, and what can how can teachers prepare their students better for university, and how can universities be better prepared to receive those students? How can we facilitate that, which for some students is quite a shock.
Thank you very much. So my last question would be to the audience, whether you feel that you got an insightful picture and very multifaceted picture of the evolving mathematical landscape. And if yes, you could demonstrate that by a joint applause for these 5 great panelists.